Philip Zimbardo is an American psychologist who has worked as a professor at Stanford University since 1968 and previously worked at Yale, NYU, and Columbia. He decided to study psychology in college because he grew up in the inner city in New York's South Bronx, which caused him to become an intuitive social psychologist. His three majors are in sociology, anthropology, and psychology, and he has a PhD in psychology from Yale. A majority of his research is motivated by the experiences he endured while growing up. Zimbardo's categories of research include prisons, time, shyness, madness, violence/evil, persuasion, hypnosis, and dissonance. His most noteworthy study was the 1971 Stanford prison experiment. Zimbardo wanted to see whether the psychological effects of becoming a prisoner or prison guard were due to the personalities of the people or the environment of the prison itself. His prediction was that the psychological effects were situational and that the atmosphere of the prison caused people to act the way they do. He closely simulated the environment of a prison and built a fake prison in the basement of Stanford's psychology department building. He then placed an ad in the local newspaper asking for volunteers to partake in a study of the psychological effects of prison life. More than 70 people responded and were given diagnostic interviews and personality tests to eliminate candidates with psychological problems, mental disabilities, or a history of crime or drug abuse. They were left with 24 people who were randomly selected to be a guard or a prisoner. They then closely simulated what a prison experience would be like by picking up the prisoners who were supposed to be in the experiment at their houses and then taking them to the jail in the basement. The guards then treated them as if they were part of an actual prison, and the guards were able to make their own rules within certain limitations. Towards the end of the trial, Zimbardo realized that he himself had begun to think more like a prison superintendent rather than a researcher. By the end of the experiment, the prisoners' sense of reality had shifted, and they no longer perceived their imprisonment as an experiment. The guards had won total control of the prison, and they commanded the blind obedience of each prisoner. What was supposed to be a 2-week-long study ended after only 6 days due to the intensification of horrific abuse from the guards and the questioning of the experiment's morality. The expected result of the study was that the environment of the prison caused the prisoners and guards to act the way they do, rather than their personalities. This was proven true at the end of the experiment after the complete change in disposition of the people who participated. They were able to see how prisons degrade people and take away their identities, and, as for the guards, how ordinary people could be turned evil when they hold a great amount of power. This experiment has affected the field of psychology by impacting our perception on how environments and situations can influence behavior. Zimbardo's research on the topic of shyness emerged from this experiment. He focused on the causes, correlations, and consequences of shyness in adults and children using a multi-method, multi-response approach. Zimbardo is also interested in the topic of madness. He was curious about how people who are functioning normally and effectively first begin to develop the symptoms of psychopathology. Zimbardo's life growing up led him to research the topic of violence because he wanted to understand the causes of human aggression and violence. Zimbardo centered in on how good people are seduced or induced to engage in violent or evil deeds by situational forces by which they find themselves surrounded. This focus is seen in the 1971 Stanford prison experiment. Overall, Zimbardo has affected the field of psychology in many ways and still continues to impact as he conducts his research today.